listening to the Sustainable Angler, and my daddy's the host.
All right, well, special thanks to my sweetheart for the introduction, and welcome to the Sustainable Angler Podcast. I'm Rick Crawford, angler, sustainability consultant, and founder of Emerger Strategies. This season, we're launching the Sustainability Blueprint, a deep dive into how fishing and outdoor brands can grow, meet retailer demands, navigate emerging regulations, and protect the places we all love. If you're part of the fishing and outdoor industry, this is your roadmap to surviving and thriving in a changing world. Let's build better brands and protect what we love together. Today on the Sustainable Angler, I'm joined by Land Tawney. Land is a 25-year conservation veteran and co-leader of American Hunters and Anglers, an organization dedicated to holding policymakers accountable when they threaten our hunting, fishing, and outdoor heritage. We're covering a lot of ground today. First, the boundary waters, where 50 Republicans, including South Carolina's own Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott, voted to allow a foreign-owned mining corporation to build a copper sulfide mine upstream of America's most visited wilderness. Copper mines have a 100% failure rate when it comes to toxic leakage. And to make it worse, those natural resources will be sold to China, then bought back by us. That's not America first. We also get into how this move sets a dangerous precedent for the Grand Staircase National Monument, new oil and gas leases in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, the relocation of the U.S. Forest Service, and the systematic dismantling of agencies like NOAA that restores habitat, provides weather forecast, and fish stock assessments. Finally, we wrap up with action steps, because your voice does matter. From voting for pro-public lands candidates this November in the midterms, to calling your elected officials and tagging them on social media, Land breaks down exactly how to fight back. And before we dive into the interview, I just want to say thank you. I'm truly grateful that you take the time to listen to this podcast. I hope these conversations inspire you to take action for nature. If you're enjoying the show, a quick free way to support it is by leaving a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. The Sustainable Angler is available anywhere you listen to podcasts and is also airing Saturdays at 2 p.m. on Charleston's first and only community-supported radio station, OHM Radio, 96.3 FM. This episode of The Sustainable Angler is brought to you by Emerger Strategies, Ecolytics, and a New Earth Project, the sustainability initiative of Atlantic Packaging. Hey everybody, Rick Crawford here. If you're running a fishing or outdoor brand, you probably got into this business for the freedom, a desire to work in an industry that you actually care about, and to protect what you love, not wrestle with sustainability scorecards and compliance regulations. But here's the truth. Retailers and regulators are paying close attention, and the brands that can answer clearly are the ones that keep their products on the shelf. That's where Emerger Strategies comes in. We help brands get retailer and regulator ready, and we help you make the business case for sustainability, so compliance strengthens your brand instead of slowing it down. That's why I built the Compliance Ready Brand Blueprint. It's a clear, practical roadmap that shows you what matters, what's coming, and gets your sustainability house in order in 30 days. If you want to protect your brand, your margins, and what you love, you'll find the blueprint at emergerstrategies.com. If you're running a fishing, outdoor, food, or apparel brand, sustainability isn't just marketing. It's directly tied to the landscapes, waterways, and communities your business depends on. But actually tracking and improving your impact can get complicated fast. Ecolytics is a software platform that helps values-driven companies measure and manage their environmental and social impact all in one place. Ecolytics helps replace scattered spreadsheets with a clear system for tracking things like emissions, sourcing practices, and social impact, so you know where you stand and what to improve next. They specialize in helping companies pursue B Corp certification, one of the most rigorous and respected standards for business sustainability. What I appreciate is that Ecolytics works hand in hand with sustainability consultants, including folks like me. That means companies get expert guidance and a platform that keeps the work organized, credible, and audit ready. Whether you're exploring B Corp certification or just getting started with sustainability as a business, Ecolytics turns your good intentions into measurable action. To learn more, visit ecolytics.io. That's ecolytics.io. And mention the Sustainable Angler podcast to get a discount on your first year subscription. Thanks to Ecolytics for supporting the show and for supporting businesses that protect the places we love.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Thanks for having me on again. Excited to talk to you today. Been around in conservation for 25 years through various organizations, the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, National Wildlife Federation, CEO for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers for a decade. And now I'm co-leading an organization called American Hunters and Anglers that we are, kind of on the front lines of conservation and willing to call spade a spade and hold people accountable for, the things that we love, which is wildlife, public lands, and public waters.
Yep. Well, thank you for your spending your entire career protecting what you love. And I'm a big fan of American Hunters and Anglers. I get a lot of, I feel like real updates and just information because it's hard, right? Just for someone who like I'm in this space, but I'm also struggling to keep up with everything that is happening. So let's start the conversation with something that happened Friday. So today's Monday, April 20th. So Friday the 17th, the Senate voted to, HJ 140 or House Joint Resolution 140, essentially to hand over mining to a foreign mining company and the headwaters of the boundary waters. So what can you just provide some additional context and color to that?
Sure. So HJR 140, what it did is it lifted a moratorium on mining in that Rainy River watershed, which is literally, as you described, just upstream from the boundary waters. For those that know the boundary waters, it's the most visited wilderness in America. It's like 1.1 million acres, super accessible to, I would say, all the way to from 5-year-olds to 95-year-olds, because you can get in there on a canoe. You have to do some portages once in a while when you're going from lakes to lakes, but it is easy traveling. The fishing in there is absolutely awesome. Both types of bass. You got pike in there. You got lake trout in there. Hunting, you can hunt for grouse. You can hunt for white-tailed deer. But really, it's just this place to explore. And, it has been the most visited wilderness since 1964 when it was established. And so this vote we anticipated it came out of the House first. It's the House Joint Resolution. So it started in the House, then came over to the Senate, got passed in the House earlier this year, came to the Senate. There was so much pushback against this and so many people voicing their opinions, I would say from Patagonia, fly fishing to Onyx Maps, which is the mapping tool that we use out here mostly. I mean, you can use it all over, but in the West to find hunting spots, from Stephen Ranella, within the hunting and fishing community, to Randy Newberg. I mean, there was so many people that were pushing back against this. The vote happened on Friday after lots of debate. It was 50-49, so one vote, which is super frustrating. That means every single senator, could have made the difference on this. And what's even more frustrating to me is this is a Chilean billionaire that owns this company. And the ore, the copper and nickel that would come out of here would be shipped to China for processing, which means if we could even get it back, we'd have to buy it back. So this is not about strategic minerals. This is not about America first. This is about some sweetheart deal for a Chilean billionaire. So I can go even more into it, but I'm pretty frustrated with it right now. I think accountability needs to be severe. It was all all the people that voted, all 50 were Republicans. And then you have the Democrats all vote against, but you did have 2 Republicans that joined the Democrats in opposing, and that was Senator Tillis from North Carolina, who big shout out to Senator Tillis, and then Senator Collins from Maine. Both those senators, bucked their party, but also bucked the White House. The White House got involved. And we had some people that we thought we had on our side, and the White House got involved with a couple of phone calls, and that turned the tide for this. So, again, kudos to those 2 and every single one of the Democrats that voted against this, and shame on you to the Republicans that did.
And so just for I'm in South Carolina, so Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Tim Scott. I reached out to their offices, did my part with emails. I gave them phone calls. And for me, I've never been to the Boundary Waters, right? But I just inherently, right? I think it's a Wendell Berry quote, do unto those downstream as you would have those upstream do unto you, right? And if you just understand the interconnectedness of all this, of why in the hell would you put a toxic mine in any headwaters, let alone America's most visited wilderness, pristine water, pristine wildlife? It doesn't make sense. And we were kind of talking before the call a little bit, and it's just I'm just so frustrated with when it seems like the overwhelming majority, right? So we vote, we put these people in office, and then through that, they're supposed to represent our interest. And it seems that despite widespread opposition, they're still voting not in the interest of what their voters are telling them that they want. And I'm super frustrated as well. It is getting out of control.
It is, and Senator Graham was one of those ones, I think, that, was close to voting with us on this piece. And, and I think, you think about, you talk about this toxic mine. Well, there's never been a copper nickel mine that hasn't leached toxic sludge in the entire history of the world, right? So this is
100% failure rate.
100% failure, right? And so it's all right, so we got that piece. And so with Senator Graham, I think he was, hearing those. I think, you heard a lot about, this is about money and maybe some people, making some money off of it. Again, that's ultimately the Chilean billionaire. Sure, there was going to be some jobs up there, maybe 20 years of jobs up there, but at what cost? There's a $77 million outdoor economy that's around the Boundary Waters up there. So you're putting that all at risk, right? For 20 years of jobs that, majority of that money, again, is going to go to Chile. So why the frustration? It comes down to money. And it comes down to, I think, really this separation from, the haves and the have-nots, and that those haves are more like billionaires and multimillionaires than the have-nots, right? But those billionaires are way out of touch, and I think they're this ruling class right now. And really the only recourse we have, thank you, by the way, for making phone calls, for sending emails.
Oh yeah.
That's our voice, right? And I get frustrated with people that they're like, man, I didn't like what happened. I'm like, well, what did you do? And they say nothing. And you're like, well, that's not democracy. You gotta use your voice, even if we do lose. And then I think ultimately, where democracy really is decided is in the elections. And so in November, and even before that with early voting, if that is able to happen. But I think that is ultimately where we're going to see if the American people are tired of this. And in this case, what an issue, right? I don't care if you're a Democrat, an independent, a Republican, we all hunt and fish, man. And we all care about clean air and clean water. And in this case, the Boundary Waters has 20% of the clean water in the entire national forest system. And we want to put that at risk. And it's at some point we got to say, hell no. And I think that is the point that we're coming to. And hopefully that's what happens.
Well, so just, I don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot because we're having a little bit of a drought here in Charleston. Nothing major, but we just hadn't had rain in a couple months, which is unusual. But then you start thinking about it's just something that people take for granted, that you think that there's an unlimited supply of clean, fresh water, and there's not. There is. I think 1% of water on the planet's fresh water. So like we're talking about like for our species survival, it's the most valuable resource, arguably, but we all have to have water to survive. So jeopardizing 20% of the United States fresh water so that a Chilean billionaire can make some more money, and then it goes to China to be processed.
Yeah.
And we would then have to buy it back from China. So we would give our own resources. So just hypothetically, let's play a different scenario. What if this was an American mining company that was in there? I still would have opposed this for the reasons of damaging the environment and fresh water. But at least in some regards, you could at least be like, well, I understand that we did it to make money. Like there's a reason for it. Like this is just a lose situation.
It is. And I would be right there with you. I think this is not the place for this type of mine. It's so sensitive up there. I mean, Minnesota is the land of 10,000 lakes, and I think it's actually like 30,000 lakes or whatever, right? But like up there, everything is connected by water. And again, this water, I've been to the mine site where they want to put the tailings, and it's right on the edge of this wetland. It like goes right up to the end of this wetland, then hits the Rainy River watershed, which goes right into the Boundary Waters. And so it's just a bad place for a mine. But yeah, I mean that it is foreign owned, that we'd have to buy the minerals back. Just as like you said, lose. And there's got to be something. I mean, I don't want to get weird and down a conspiracy hole, but like, Trump during his first administration, this Chilean billionaire owned a mansion in Washington, D.C., and he rented that to Ivanka Trump and to Jared Kushner at way below what was supposed to be asked of that mansion. And so that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as I'm concerned on something that's going on. I don't know, but I kind of know. And so that's what's, again, like this billionaire class, right, that is talking and making all the decisions, in the world. Like I don't know. It's frustrating. I guess the last thing I would say is I thought of this as you were talking. Regardless of where anybody that's listening to this is on this conflict that's going on right now in Iran and whatever, you talk about like the threat of hitting these desalination plants, right? Which they depend on for all their water because they live in a desert that used to be kind of Mesopotamia, right? It used to be this huge productive place, and now they have to depend on these desalination for clean water. Like, I mean, that we're willing to risk that for a foreign-owned entity. It just drives me nuts, man. I don't want future generations to have to be, depending on desalination plants that, could potentially be blown up. And then what happens with the people like that? We don't last very long without clean water.
Yeah. And in America, it at least up until Friday was 20% more abundant. And
totally.
And it's just, I don't know. I just, whenever this happened, I started messaging you like immediately, I think on Instagram. I was just like, because like I was just like, I've got to like vent this somehow. Like this is bullshit. Like, are you kidding? Like how? So is there anything that can be done at this point to overturn this or do something about it?
It's a good question. So great question. There's going to be lawsuits regardless, right? So that what this obscure legislative maneuver that they used, it's called the Congressional Review Act. That's never been used before in a way like this. And so there'll be lawsuits over it. The parliamentarian in the Senate, I think, said that it wasn't like germane or, whatever language they used. John Thune, the majority leader, overturned that, and so they were able to go forward with it. And so I think there's going to be a lawsuit no matter what. That'll slow things down at some level. And then the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources has to approve this. And so there's going to be a ton of pressure on them as well. Here in Montana, where I'm from, we approved a mine at the headwaters of the Smith River, which is, a very special place. It's the only permitted river in Montana. And part of the reason that was approved is because there really wasn't anything in state law that, you could try to make it better, but you really couldn't disapprove. And so they're working on that in Minnesota right now. So I think there's that recourse. And then there's, what I talked about before is elections matter, and we'll see what happens, in November. But Congress could do something about this for sure if they decide that that's the way that they want to go. There's actually an active piece of legislation. I think it's called the Boundary Waters Protection Act, something like that, that would codify kind of this moratorium on mining in that watershed. But, so I would say there's three, but, besides, I'm in shock that it's 50, it was 50 to 49. And that has implications for a bunch of other things. And when you look at like the part that I'm most nervous about is, again, that there was so much attention paid to the boundary waters. All these different brands, were coming out. All these different influencers are coming out. All these different organizations are coming out and saying, hell no. And it still went forward. There's a bunch of places that don't have that cachet of the boundary waters that they're going to go after. And so this was a balloon they were floating. And if it works this way, they're going to use it other places. So that makes me nervous for our public lands and our public waters in general. But there's still some recourse, I would say. But it's a dark day for conservation, just that vote even happened the way it did.
Well, I want to get into some of the other just craziness that's happening with our public lands, but I did see, and man, I forget the name of it, but I think it was in Wyoming. There's some group that is now, like, speaking of like, what can you do? Like, you can vote your values basically. And there was some, I saw something probably on social media, but it was some group in Wyoming that is now like categorizing if the candidate is pro public land or not, like no matter what party they're in. And it's like a way for you to say, like, let's just say, like many people do, they vote their party, which is crazy to me. But that's how a lot of people vote. But now you're going, all right, well, if I'm going to vote between two Republicans, I want to know which one is pro public lands. I forget the name of the org doing that, but I feel like there needs to be more of that.
Yeah, they're a political action committee, so they're a PAC, so they can do all politics that they want. I can't remember their name right now either, but they're putting like anti-public lands or pro-public lands in like almost like, in poster form, and so then you can see kind of where they are on things, and doing exactly what you're talking about. Wyoming is a pretty conservative state, and so like primaries are probably the best place to have these conversations. And so you can pick between the two. And Wyoming, is a conservative state, but it's also a huge public land state. And people love hunting and fishing on public lands and public waters. And so this issue, everybody, it's kind of been like, it's kind of become like this like fashionable thing, right? To be, I'm for public lands, right? But then people vote against that all the time. And so here they're just going to report the facts and tell you what's going on, and then you can make up that mind. And I think for us at American Hunters and Anglers, we're a C4, and so we can do more grassroots lobbying than you can as a C3, right? Like we can do unlimited, where C3 is limited to 20%, and that's like trout unlimited, that's like backcountry hunters and anglers, etc. But we're forming a PAC so that we can get involved in elections, and really, I think at the end of the day, I said this earlier, but that is what politicians really understand. I talk about like sometimes, training a dog, right? Like you use treats forever, and then you got a hard-headed lab that you can't, and so you get out the shot collar. I think that's what's happening right now is we're using the shot collar, trying to hold these politicians accountable. But at the end of the day, you got to vote them in and vote them out. Maybe that dog shouldn't be hunting. Maybe that dog don't hunt. And that's like the elections are the places to do that. And so you'll see some stuff from us. We're not, we're a pretty small shop. And so we'll only get involved in 2 or 3 probably races, but we will get involved. And hopefully, you send a message with that. Down in Wyoming, that's what they're trying to do, is send a message that you cannot say you're for these things and then do other actions. And so we're going to try to do that at a federal level as well.
That's cool. And I'll say, just kind of on that note, if you're listening to this and you live in South Carolina, there's a nonprofit called Conservation Voters of South Carolina, and they'll like rate local candidates and stuff based on their conservation policy. And I will say that in South Carolina, a lot of people don't realize this, conservation is actually built into our Constitution. So like right. People in South Carolina are huge supporters of conservation public lands. There's a lot of hunters and anglers in South Carolina that
Totally.
do that here, but and elsewhere too, right? I mean, we're not that far from the Everglades. I go down there all the time, or I
Totally.
say all the time, once a year. Like
Yeah, yeah.
we're not too far from a lot of different places that we get around to, and so there's a conservation ethic, and I just it I don't know. I'm super frustrated with the result of this. Hopefully, some of these lawsuits will slow it down enough to where something else could be done. But to your point, at the end of the day, your vote is you get what you deserve, right? I mean, and
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I mean, there's a lot of other issues, that people care about, right?
Yeah,
Like it's not just conservation. I happen to wear the conservation, that's what I vote for.
right.
But we should be demanding, they shouldn't be, the Democrats do this and the Republicans do this and, independents do this. All three of those entities should represent us on conservation because it makes so much damn sense. Like if there's anything we can agree upon in this country, it's public lands, public waters, and public wildlife, right? And so let's agree on that. And so every one of those parties represents that. And right now, that's not the case. And so we have to force that to happen. We have to demand that to happen. And if we do that, then we're in a much different place. Then we're talking about, not fringe issues, but we're just tweaking that, right? We're tweaking that at that point and trying to get the best. And there may be some different philosophies, but if we got to that fundamental place, man, I'd be, my job would be done and I could go do something else, and so that's the work really.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about, because this isn't it, right? This isn't the only thing going on with public lands. It's been last year. Thankfully, everyone raised hell about the public land sell-off, and that gave me some hope. And then this brought me back down to frustration. And so now there's some other things that are happening. Grand Staircase, right? What's happening there?
Yeah. So here's I would just say, I've been using the term flood the zone, right? And you flood the zone, and then it's oh my God, there's so much going on. You said it earlier, it's hard to keep track of. That's being done on purpose. They're doing everything they can to try to just squeeze some things through. So Staircase Escalante, Grand Staircase Escalante, it's a national monument down in southern Utah. Absolutely awesome. It's got some trout fishing in there, which is in the desert, very rare. It's got some bighorn sheep populations there, some mule deer populations. Super rad landscape. And they're trying to use that same obscure legislative maneuver, that Congressional Review Act, to undo the management plan there and open that up for coal leasing. And again, I see coal trains go by me every day in Missoula. We've got a big coal plant in central Montana, or coal mine, and all that shit's getting shipped to China. I'm oh my God. And sure, somebody's making some money in Montana on that, and that company's making some money, but the Staircase Escalante, it's a special place. And so the clock's ticking on that too. When you have this Congressional Review Act, you got 60 days. And so Boundary Waters is going to be up April 29th. I believe that the CRA countdown for Staircase is mid-June. So it's one to think about, right? And I think that national monuments, the first one was established by Theodore Roosevelt. So that was Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Then he went on to designate a bunch of other ones. Cascade Siskiyou National Monument, I think, was another one in Oregon. But they've been designated by pretty much every single president, Republican and Democrat. Bush did a huge one that was a marine protection area, protect, stuff in saltwater. And, there's been a way to pay it forward. And so this happens on the Grand Staircase, watch out for another monument, coming next. Right. And so in Montana, there's one called the Upper Missouri Breaks. It's one of the most amazing places to hunt elk in the country, in the world. I caught a gigantic paddlefish. It was 93.5 pounds. It was that's a whole story, dude. It was I still can't believe that happened. But it's an awesome place, but there's opportunities for oil and gas development there too. And so, as these things get chipped away and they float these balloons, which Grand Staircase Escalante is in the national monument realm, that's a huge threat to monuments everywhere. And so it's one we're really paying attention to. It's one that people can talk to their elected leaders. They don't know much about it. We've been covering it for a little bit on our Instagram and trying to do some stuff there. It's got, I think there's 100 different outfitters that operate there. And it's part of that kind of whole landscape down in Utah. When you think about, the canyon lands and arches national parks and those kind of things. This is a national monument, so it's a little bit different. You can run cattle in there, you can drive in there, you can shoot, you can do recreational shooting everywhere. Besides, where there's infrastructure and there's buildings and stuff, which makes sense for safety. But like a national monument is kind of a step down from a national park, so a lot more uses are allowed. And so it's just a place, that we think is special and should stay that way, and is, great for hunting and fishing. So that's a big one that people should pay attention to.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
We set out with a New Earth project to really start a movement.
It's a global coalition of people who are deeply concerned and want to accelerate the transition away from problematic packaging to more sustainable solutions.
Our entire value proposition was built on helping companies package things better. We were doing sustainability before sustainability was cool. We just called it packaging optimization. And packaging optimization really is about using less. And we built our whole business on that. People send us their products, their goods, and we help them design packaging systems and solutions for the least possible cost, utilizing the least amount of material. Use less is always the right answer.
And that's what I see with companies like a New Earth Project, is it's like we're just trying to create solutions for big companies and small, that makes it easier for them, cheaper for them, whatever it is, and then has less impact. Not just trying to tell people you should have less impact and making the choice forced on them. Like, make it better for everybody, and it'll make it better for the whole world.
We see the problem, and we are with you.
Yeah, I don't know. It's wild. And then so they are basically going to try and use this CRA to see what else they can get away with, because they've gotten away with the biggest one, right? So in theory, totally, these other ones should be even easier to get away with, right? Because it's if we got the vote for the boundary waters, then what's a national monument like?
That's the theory, I think, and that's one of the reasons why I think that the accountability needs to be severe on these elected leaders that just voted for this. And, I'm going out to DC next week, or this week. I'm going to leave tomorrow morning, and we're going to do accountability all week, and make them feel some pain for that vote. And so that they think twice about, using the CRA for different things. There's another piece that isn't congressional, but it's the administration. Just last Friday, when it rains, it pours, but just this last Friday, they announced leases in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So oil and gas leases in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So, development's happening on the North Slope. They say, all right, that's going to happen for oil and gas. We need that. Let's set aside the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, as a place for wildlife and a place to hunt and fish, and for future generations, the Gwich'in tribe that's up there, so that they can continue to practice, kind of their hunting and gathering they've been doing for, in time immemorial. And so, they've got a huge herd of caribou up there called the porcupine caribou herd, if anybody's ever heard of that. And you have like muskox up there, you have polar bears, you have brown bears, lots of good fishing opportunities. So they just announced that. And now the last time they announced the lease sale up there, they wanted $1 billion. And by the way, this is to pay off the big, beautiful bill that was passed, last summer, for tax cuts for billionaires, et cetera. But they only raised 16 million and they wanted to raise 1 billion. And the reason that was is those companies, Exxon, Shell, Conoco, those big oil companies that they knew that it was a bad look to go into the National Wildlife Refuge system. And so lease sale is open right now. It's open through June 5th. We're actually got a post that's coming up today. I just recorded it. I think you can call Congress about that and make them mad. It's kind of a bank shot. But then the companies are the ones that, and again, they only spent $16 million and they were looking to raise $1 billion on these leases last time. They do feel some of the pressure from the people, and they should, because it's a national wildlife refuge. It's like the crown jewel, the entire National Wildlife Refuge system. So that's another huge one. And again, and that happens on a Friday. Like, all bad news comes out on a Friday, right? Because people are heading to the weekend. You went out and got a bunch of sun. I got a bunch of sun. We both are glowing from that, which is awesome. But, they slip that stuff in there and we don't know about it unless somebody talks about it. And so that's, at American Hunters and Anglers, that's what we're trying to do, is just make sure people know what's going on and then give opportunities for them to get engaged. But that's another one. I mean, we talked earlier about this Forest Service reorg, which is just like,
yeah, oh yeah, they're what? And then moving the headquarters to the least, at least I guess, politically unfriendly to public land state, right? Or I don't know if that's true or not. It seems like
Salt Lake City is in the middle of Utah, which is home to, like, I mean, and it's not just Mike Lee. Like, there's been, I mean, politicians in Utah have been horrible on public lands for decades, and now you want to move our Forest Service headquarters there, which then you think there's not going to be any undue influence. Like, I mean, come on.
And then getting rid of regional offices as well, right? So that you don't have the people who understand what's happening in those areas. So they're less out of touch with it, which I would assume would make it easier for someone in Salt Lake to just say, oh, sure, we'll just go ahead and clear cut that, or yeah, sure, open that up, or because they don't really know, they don't have the pulse of what's really happening locally or regionally.
Totally. I mean, I think the first thing is like moving the headquarters from DC to Salt Lake. DC is where all these money decisions are made, right? And like that's where like senators are who represent their home states. And so if they have issues in their states with the Forest Service in particular, they can have those conversations in real time with the leaders out in Washington, DC. Again, you're moving that to Utah, where there'll be, basically, a couple senators and that have undue influence. But they're also going to be out of those money conversations, which is horrible because the Forest Service budget through Democratic administrations, through Republican administrations, that budget's been going down for, decades. And so, now they're going to be out of touch there. When the Bureau of Land Management did this during Trump 1, they lost, I think, somewhere around 80% of the workforce because people are like, I'm not leaving Washington, D.C. because this is where my home is. This is where my kids are going to school. It's where they're playing sports. This is where their friends are. And so you lost like a lot of institutional knowledge there. And then we go into this regional thing and, they are creating some state offices. So like you're reshuffling the decks of the Titanic as it goes down in a lot of ways. And then, like they're taking, these regions, they had a lot of expertise there too. Right. And so like in Montana, which I know best, is we're moving from Missoula, where I live is where the regional office has been forever. They're going to move the state office to Helena. Now that's like 2 hours away. It's where the state capital is, where the government is. And so there's going to be some influence by the governor there in particular. But same thing, if you are living here in Missoula and you have a base here, are you going to move there? And I just don't think they are. I really don't think they are. We're going to lose this institutional knowledge. And, not only are you going to take those decisions away, and like a lot of them are going to be made in Salt Lake, but they have relationships with people on the ground, right? Like these folks that live here in Missoula, they are part of the communities. They are, like they are the Little League, baseball coaches, they are going to school dances with their kids, you see them in the community, they're very accessible. And so you're taking that away from the people and reshuffling that. And I think that's being done on purpose. I think that they don't really have a plan on what this looks like. It's happening right before fire season. To me, this has been one of the driest winters we've ever had, like in Montana and across the West. I know that in the East, they got dumped on in snow a little bit up in, and up in the north central part of the country. But in the West, it's been pretty darn dry. And I'm nervous, why would you do this? And again, I think it's part of this dismantle of the Forest Service, right? And if you dismantle it, then it's like, oh, it doesn't work. And then you have to privatize it. And if you privatize it, that means, one, the land is privatized, but it's also like everything that's being done in the forest is privatized. And so, somebody's making money off it and it's not going to, necessarily turn out great for the American people. So that's another big one. And it's out there.
Well, so I've done some, I've been doing some work on, so it seems like the same thing that they're doing with public lands, Forest Service, this dismantling, they're doing the same thing with NOAA, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like in South Carolina last year, a bunch of people who worked at the NOAA office got laid off. So to your, like, I'm everything you just said, I'm like, oh my God, the same exact thing's happening on everywhere on the coast, right? Because of NOAA. And it's going, okay, so they let go of a bunch of people, then a bunch of people go look for other jobs, or they have to move on, right? They got to make ends meet. So you lose that knowledge. Then they want to slash any budgets related to it, so that there's just no funding for it. And then everyone goes, well, hang on, people basically take for granted what the U.S. Forest Service does, what NOAA does for everybody, because it's taken for granted, because you're just like, oh, well, that's what NOAA does, right? They help with our weather. They help with our tides. They help with our forecasting for hurricanes. Huge thing for hurricanes down there. Fighting wildfires. Like, I mean, I was in Colorado last month, and I mean, the flowers were blooming, and I was at 6,000 feet, and I was like, matter of fact, crazy thing, it was record temperature where I was in Montrose, Colorado, record high. And it was colder in Charleston than it was in Montrose, Colorado, in March. So anyway, I'm just making this connection where this is a strategic, systematic dismantling what appears to be of who is managing and conserving and preserving and restoring our natural resources that we all pay. Like, those are taxes I'm glad to pay.
Absolutely.
I'm like, it's like, for a business, if you're a 1% for the Planet member, you're donating 1% of your sales, right? That's a self-imposed tax, more or less, right? But to pay for NOAA and the Forest Service, those are taxes that I'm all too happy to pay. Like, and I think people aren't realizing the full repercussions of this.
I mean, what we as taxpayers get, what we get as American citizens for, I think it's like, don't quote me, I guess I'm on podcast, so I guess I am being quoted, but it's something like $3 like a U.S. citizen, right? Like, to manage our public lands. And that's Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, national parks, all that combined. And like, what we get, and as far as recreational opportunities, what we get as far as like tourism opportunities, I would say, that are associated with that, what we get for clean air and clean water, that those public lands are essential to. Like, it's such a screaming deal, like, it's such a screaming deal. And I just, that's why, I'm frustrated today. We started this conversation. I'm a little frustrated, but I do believe in the people. I do believe in our democracy. And sometimes, Rich, stuff has to get really bad, and I think that when you're saying, people are taking for granted, NOAA, then shit has to go sideways, and they're like, wait a minute, why are we doing this? And so I think people are waking up to what's going on, and that, they're going to voice their opinions. And, not only does that help stop some things, I hope that, we get some positive things, something that we're not even really thinking about right now. And, I think that if you look back in conservation history in particular, that anytime there was something that was facing this country that was like super detrimental to our conservation legacy, like, we the people stepped up. And so now, it's just like my mentor used to call it the great occasion. There's no great leaders, there's just great occasions. And those great occasions, like, inspire leaders to come up. And that can be anybody, no matter, this podcast, like people making phone calls, whatever that leadership is. This is our great occasion, man. And I think not only can we stop it, but good stuff can happen.
All right. So American hunters and anglers, you're headed up to DC this week. You're going to be talking with elected officials. Yep. What is that accountability look like from your perspective with that? Is it like, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I think it has to be public.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're going to use our opportunity. I mean, I don't think we're going to be able to record any conversations that we have elected officials. That's not going to happen. But are we going to hold them accountable through social media and call them out by name? Abso-frickin-lutely, man. And I think that for too long, that the community, sportsman's community, I think in general, has done all this stuff behind closed doors. Something bad will happen that they disagree with, and they'll go in there to Senator X and express their disappointment, express their displeasure, and say, we want you on this next thing. And they're like, okay. And maybe that next thing happens. Maybe you get a portion of that next thing, or maybe it's something totally separate. But these things will be continuing to be done to us until they're held accountable, like in a public eye. And I would say throughout my 25 years of working on this, the only time you can build coalitions, you can build relationships, and that is all still important. I think needs to continue. But the only time I've really seen elected leaders really, people say it, if they change their mind, they're flip-flopping. I'm like, bullshit. Like, they just got more information and the people demanded what they wanted from them. And the only time I've really seen them switch is when they've been demanded publicly. It hasn't been in private. And I think those things work in conjunction, to be honest, right? Like, I think that you have the people that are talking to them behind closed doors and being like, man, you got yourself in a corner. Let us help you out of that. But unless you have the people on the outside holding them accountable and like publicly, then that conversation is much different. And so next week, you'll see stuff from us, or this week, I guess. Like, we're going to be pretty aggressive as far as holding people accountable, and especially in relation to this, this mine up on the Boundary Waters. I've been using a line, and this is fairly aggressive, but it's like, these people that have voted for this would rather, lick the boots of a Chilean billionaire than stand with the American people. And so that's going to be, they're bootlickers of a Chilean billionaire. And it's like, and so we're going to hold, those are the terms we're going to use. And like, I can't wait. Our senator from Montana, Senator Sheehy, is already trying to walk back his vote. He's from Minnesota. He's been in the Boundary Waters. Like, he grew up in there. And I'm like, and he's already like, well, I'm going to try to make sure the process. And I'm like, dude, you missed your chance. Like, you had your chance. You had that opportunity to put your finger on the scale and you didn't do it. And so he's going to feel it, and he should. And then hopefully, like on the next issue, whether that's Grand Staircase, whether that's pushing back against, what's going on up in the Arctic, whether that's, road to shul stuff that's going to come up here like in the next couple of weeks. He has an opportunity to show that he's actually listening and that he will stand up for us. And so, we're going to hold him accountable to try to push him that way.
I love that. Well, feel free to call out Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott. I'd be more than happy to share anything, my disapproval of how they voted, and I think a lot of South Carolinians, I should say, feel the same way. I think we all feel betrayed as hunters and anglers and as people in a state who really value conservation. So thank y'all for going up there and holding these people accountable. And I think for us that are maybe not in DC, or anglers that are in our home states, I think if you had to say, all right, well, here's your to-do list this week. What can we do to try and make an impact?
Rick, that is a great question. I think do some of the things you've already been doing. You talked about making a phone call. Like, a lot of times these votes happen and people are like, oh, we lost that one. But a phone call to them, voicing that displeasure, being like, shame on you. Like, why did you do that? I think is super helpful. The emails to them aren't quite as effective. I'll just be totally like this. Like, I want to be transparent. Like, they get so many emails that it really doesn't break through the noise. Other things you can do is like on social media, right? And not everybody is necessarily comfortable about doing a video. That'd be probably the strongest, is like do a video from your own perspective. Hey, Senator Graham, hey, Senator Scott, super disappointed in what you did. The Boundary Waters is a place that I have never visited, but I want to go to someday. Plus it has, 20% of the clean water, et cetera. You can do that from yourself and say it from the heart, right? And then tag them in that post and they'll see it. You can go on their pages, right? And tell them how disappointed you are. There's a lot of, you look at comments, there's a lot of people that are doing that. As long as you're, polite, or at least don't swear or don't threaten them with like violence,
right,
they're going to keep it up on the page. And it turns into really like our modern day town hall. Like a lot of times, they're not having town halls anymore for various reasons, which I totally disagree with. You got to face the music sometimes, especially as an elected leader that's supposed to represent your constituents. But social media is like a modern day town hall. So I think those are good. And then, get outside like you and I did this weekend and get some of that fresh air, and like revitalize. I went fishing, and man, we went out. I didn't catch a fish, but I got to see a sharp-shinned hawk like chasing all these birds around. I got to see a kingfisher catch a fish. Thank you, kingfisher. I can't catch a fish, but you can. But it restored me, and I think that sometimes, me in particular, like I get caught with my head down, like I'm, trying to do much as I can on policy. And then I forget sometimes, like maybe not forget, but I need to get re-engaged or in touch with the outdoors, because when I feel, that cold water on my feet, or that wind in my face or sun on my neck, like I'm like, oh, this is what I'm fighting for, so yeah, I think that's what I would do if I was folks listening to this, South Carolina, wherever you are, you have an opportunity to hold these people accountable, and you have an opportunity to get outside and remember why we're doing this in the first place.
Well, I love it, Land. Where can folks who want to get more engaged with American hunters and anglers, where can they go? Where can they follow y'all and start to get more engaged?
Totally. So best place is on Instagram and Facebook. I will say, they're connected through Meta. Instagram is where our biggest platform is. And so that's just American Hunters Anglers. No and in the middle of that. So you can look that up. You should be able to find us pretty easily. We have a website called nolandgrab.com. I would say if you like what you're hearing, you can give us a donation, $5 to whatever you want to give, to try to help us really hold these folks accountable, would be helpful. But yeah, and then, like I just appreciate you, Rick, I think this opportunity to have this conversation that we've had today, we're doing stuff on social media, and like I did a rant after that vote last week, and it was 3 minutes, and my team was like, nobody's going to listen for 3 minutes. It ended up being a huge reel for us, but like 3 minutes is still pretty short, right? Like, the conversation we've had today, we can actually talk about some of the nuances. And so I just thank you, man, for your platform and what you're doing, and appreciate you, because, hopefully, some people listening to this day, or listening to this today, don't feel like, the world is over either. Like we still have opportunities to do something.
Yeah, I love that. And I appreciate the kind words. And I think that's my takeaway from this conversation is there are going to be opportunities, right? So I really appreciate it, Land. I'm going to get this out this week, and hopefully we'll get some folks active and engaged, and follow along. American Hunters and Anglers, or just American Hunters Anglers on Instagram, because I get so much information from y'all, and it's helpful, right? Just to be able to try and keep up. And by the way, there's still more stuff that we could cover.
Totally.
In this conversation, like this is like there's the roadless rule. There's all sorts of stuff. But this, I think, if this is a good overview of kind of snapshot of where we are right now. There's some more stuff coming up, but stay active, give them a follow, and keep up with what's going on. So I really appreciate it, Land.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to head over to emergerstrategies.com for all your sustainability consulting needs, and check out our new The Compliance Ready Brand Blueprint, which is designed to get your sustainability house in order in 30 days or less.